welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name's Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros.
Coming at you live.
Not this again. Why?
It sounds great.
It sounds great until it's not true.
It's totally true.
If only Matt knew how to start an episode of the podcast.
Guys,
then we'd have so many more listeners.
Send in your suggestions. Send in your suggestions for a better opening line for me.
Yeah, thank you. We here like to read books.
Yeah.
Matt sent me an article about how to read more books this year.
Yeah. On ink dot, not INK dot, but incorporated dot.
Yeah, and Matt will surely send you a link in the notes.
It's going to be there.
It's an okay article, I thought.
Yeah, and after having read it, you'll realise you don't need to read more articles.
Yeah, you should read a good quality book instead.
Exactly. So, one of the things that we love is the value of learning, and we think reading is a valuable way of getting that.
Yeah, and basically, this article suggests that the average person reads 4 books a year.
Yeah, if you know the average person, do please ask them. Yeah. How many books did you read last year?
Interview them.
Yeah, it would be great actually. Yeah.
But if
Matt and Dave interviewed the average person.
And their perspective on it is that the average person is your quote-unquote competition. Yeah. And reading is something that you can do to get ahead of everybody else.
To increase your knowledge. Knowledge is power, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing.
And of course, one of the last episodes we did last year was on actually the power of reflecting on your things that you do know in the knowledge. So it's better to actually read less and reflect more than just to read loads.
But the important thing is it's all about power. Right?
Yeah.
Power of reflection, knowledge is power, going to the gym makes you powerful.
Yeah, 2024 has a different tenor already about it.
Or not.
Make It Count goes on a power trip.
So
the article opens with tip number 7 tips. We won't talk about them all, but the first one I think is a good one, which is read physical books.
Yeah. I still think we should rewind a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Rewind.
Rewind.
Why might you want to read, Matt?
Well, I enjoy it.
You enjoy it?
Why do you want to read, David?
That's the best reason to read. Ultimately, if you meet someone that reads, it's because they are enthusiastic readers. They're passionate about it. They find a joy in it. So hopefully, the way to get there is to find a book you enjoy or a genre you enjoy and reading. And then generally, over time, that will grow.
Absolutely.
And so whether you read fiction or non-fiction. So
that's very true actually, because there are different kinds of reading, aren't there? There is reading that I do for my professional work that I don't necessarily find that enjoyable, but it is quite necessary if I'm going to do a good job and if I'm going to grow in that area of my knowledge. So there's grind reading almost, isn't there?
Yeah, there's your enjoyable, this is your fiction book. There's your relatively enjoyable, this is your non-fiction book. Then there's your technical books.
Yeah.
And they're a different level.
And there's reference books.
Yeah, and so, but actually, once you realise that there is a joy that can be found in it, you can do maybe things that are not as enjoyable within that and still get the value from it.
One of the reasons why perhaps we don't read as much as we think we should, or people maybe used to, is that it is actually hard work mentally. I mean, you've told me this before. It's one of the more difficult things for our brains to do, is to sort of look at those symbols on the page and translate them into meaning and meanings in sentences and paragraphs. It's much more difficult than watching pictures that move with words that are just, because that's obviously much more analogous to what we experience in real life, conversations and pictures moving. So reading words off a page is a mentally demanding task.
And yet, it's differently demanding. So, say you're reading a non-fiction book on trust, for example, that may have happened to somebody. I've read a few books on trust, shall we say. You can read that book at your own pace. If you get stuck on a bit, you can reread it. If a part makes you really think about something or triggers a memory, you can meditate on that. If you watched a video that's an hour long on that, there will be lots of extra information that you don't need. So you'll have to work harder to filter that out. You won't engage with it. If it's a live thing, you won't be able to pause it. You can't just like go up to the person on the stage and be like, stop talking. I need to think. Like,
unless you're the king.
Unless you're the king. And actually, so the way we engage with information is different. So my preferred way of getting information is through books because I'm much more in control of it. I can pace myself. It's a lake that I can go at in my pace and pick up in that space. So I think reading
David's lake of knowledge.
Well, who knows? And that's one of the things they talk about in the article, that actually knowledge compounds. And lots of the stuff I've learned recently about cognitive science suggests that long-term memory is near infinite. And the more you get, the quicker you can learn, because the quicker it builds on that. And so it takes up less space in your working memory so you can engage with new information.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things Elon Musk has talked about in the past, hasn't he? Go back to first principles. Learn the history of that subject, work your way through it so that you can track all the way through it, and you're putting the bits in the right filing cabinet. So he sort of talks about in his brain which bit goes where, which bit, this gets that bit, this bit connects to that bit, and then you're able to be creative with that. Then you're able to learn from that.
Yeah. Thanks, David, for taking us through the why. I think that's helpful. Otherwise, it's just, it's another thing on read more books because you should, because you want to get ahead.
And there's two different whys. Fiction, because you enjoy it. It's immersive. It's more replenishing for the most part than watching TV.
Yeah.
Non-fiction, that's information sometimes told well, but often from an expert who spent years studying that.
Yeah.
And probably most books take between 3 to 7 hours to read.
You can get the best of their work. You can get
decades worth of insight in 3 to 7 hours.
Yes. And the benefit, of course, we're talking again, we said at the beginning, top of the episode, don't necessarily want to read more articles, and that is one of their tips, is apportion your reading time well. So, the benefit of books, even though that the classic statement was always don't believe everything you know that's published, but especially not online, because most of what's published on the internet isn't edited even once. It's not even passed any editorial process, whereas a book that has been published by a respectable publisher has passed through multiple editions, multiple editors, and checks and balances. So you're much more likely to get something that's of higher quality and much less likely to get something that's utter rubbish.
Yeah, so the title of the article, and maybe probably the title of this episode, will be How to Read More Books.
Yes.
And whilst I would dispute that that's always the goal is not to read more books always. But if you're the average person, hello average person, and you've been only reading 4 books a year, actually, that's probably not that much.
Yeah.
And why not aim for 1 a month?
Yeah.
That's 12 books. Think about which 12 you most want to read. They can be fiction, non-fiction. You have freedom. That's the choice. But actually, upping that a little bit can make a really big difference.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things.
There's actually a helpful website that you've linked me before, and I'll put in the show notes as well. I think it's just called How Long to Read. You go to it, you type in a book title when you find it, and you just say, this is how long it will take the average reader to read. I mean, again, it's great if you're the average reader. But you can actually also on that website do a test. How long does it take me to read this portion? And it'll tell you this is your reading speed. And that will give you literally a sort of an hours and minutes. How long is it going to take you to read this book? And, look at some of them, and I read quite slowly. So some of them, it is sometimes like, it's going to be 10 hours to read that. But then you realise, again, the average person in the UK or the US, what is probably on screen times about 5-6 hours a day.
That's what they reckon.
In leisure time. And so you go, well, actually, I could read a book in 2 days if I traded out some of that screen time, even just 2 nights a week. Which obviously I'm not saying do that all instantly, but that's a book a week if I just trade that a little bit of time. So it's amazing how much more we can read.
Yeah. One of the reasons they say to read physical books is because when you have physical books in your home, they are physical reminders.
Yes.
So have books around. There was one person I was reading and he was like, I buy multiple copies of the same book if it's a really good book, and I'll leave them at different places in my house. Because then I'll be like, oh yeah, where was that bit? Or I'll reread it. And so it's there in different places, and they're these reminders. So in the same way that we carry our phone everywhere with us. So when our phone is with you, that's the reminder. That's your first go-to.
Yeah.
If you put that somewhere else and you have these physical books in your physical space, you notice them, you see them, you think, oh yeah, I forgot I had that, I should read that.
Yes.
And so
The convenience of a digital device like a Kindle, like an e-reader, is great for travel, but exactly that. You can hide 1,000 books in that thing and it looks the same.
Yeah.
It's not that same visual cue of, here's a load of books that you've said you want to read.
Yeah.
They stay out of sight, out of mind.
So, how to read more books? Well,
We've hardly touched on any of the points so far.
Set a goal. I'll, once a month. I want to finish a book a month.
Yeah.
Have physical books.
Read between all the things you're doing. So that example is
Fill
perfect.
the space.
If he's got multiple books around the house, as he's doing different things in a day, between one thing and the other, I'll just quickly read a little bit. You used to carry books in your car with you.
When I was tennis coaching, if I was waiting for a session to start, I'd have books in the car. So you can fill those spaces in your day. Hey, I'm waiting for the food to cook, it's in the oven.
Yeah.
I'll read for 10 minutes instead of looking on my phone for 20 minutes, you know? And so it's just those little things. But ultimately, it always starts with your desire. Whether your desire is for power or for knowledge
Or for pure enjoyment.
For pure enjoyment. And actually, knowledge that you can use to help others. Like many of the things you read and I read, it's like, well, I find it valuable, but actually it helps me become a better person, or it helps me help other people more.
Absolutely. So we'll link the link in the show notes.
Link the link.
And hopefully this year you can join us in reading more valuable and more books.
And partly why we wanted to do this episode, I think, is because we noticed from looking at some of our data that a lot of our most listened to episodes are book reviews of some sort or other. So we're going to do a few more of them through this year. Let us know.
Maybe we should rename it the Book Bros.
The Book Bros, the Taylor Bros. So let us know, is there a book you even would like us to read and review?
Yeah.
Or we'll just keep picking ones that we find interesting
Absolutely.
and talking about them.
See you next time.